A little street urchin was locked inside an abandoned public restroom. She had been screaming for help for hours, her voice almost gone. When a millionaire heard her cries and opened the door, he froze in panic. The child's face was identical to someone he could never forget, someone who died because of him. What happened next would forever change both of their destinies. Subscribe to the channel for heartwarming stories every day. The millionaire drove his imported car through the deserted streets of the wrong side of the tracks, an area he normally avoided. An unexpected detour forced him to cross this forgotten neighborhood where abandoned buildings stood in stark contrast to the opulence of the financial district he dominated. His fingers drummed impatiently on the leather steering wheel, annoyed at being late for a crucial meeting. The glass mansion he called home awaited him on the other side of town, a monument to his wealth and, ironically, to his loneliness. He was past 50, and what did he have to show for it besides the zeros in his bank account? His cold eyes rarely showed emotion, not since the accident. 7 years had passed since that rainy night. 7 years since he lost everything that really mattered. The memory still cut like shattered glass. The phone call, the hospital, the doctors with their heads hung low. "I'm sorry, sir. Your wife didn't make it," and then the revelation that shattered his world. She was 5 months pregnant. Traffic started moving again, and he sped up as if he could escape his memories. He was passing an abandoned complex when an unexpected sound penetrated the vehicle's soundproofing. He stopped the car, intrigued. There was something about that faint, distant, almost inaudible cry. Meanwhile, inside the ruined public restroom, the girl huddled in the farthest corner from the door, shivering with cold and fear. Her bare feet were hurt and dirty, and the dress, once colorful, was now just a gray rag. "Help!" she tried to shout for the 100th time, but her voice was now just a hoarse whisper. Silent tears ran down her thin face, leaving streaks in the dirt that covered her cheeks. It had been 7 hours since the man locked her in there, after snatching her from the street corner where she was selling candy. "You're messing with my business, kid," he said, before shoving her inside the abandoned restroom and locking the door from the outside. The darkness swallowed her, and the smell of mold and decay suffocated her small lungs. Through the crack in the broken window, a sliver of afternoon light entered, allowing her to see the deplorable state of the place. Broken tiles, graffiti on the walls, and vestiges of when the space had once been part of civilization. The girl closed her eyes and thought of the mother she never knew. On the streets, she'd heard stories about angels who protected lost children. She tried to imagine one coming to save her. But angels didn't exist in the real world she knew. In the 7 years of her short life, no one had ever saved her. Then, suddenly, a different sound. Footsteps. Someone was approaching. The girl held her breath, fearing it was the man coming back, but the steps were different, more measured. A shadow blocked the little light that came through the crack. "Is anyone there?" A male voice, deep and controlled, echoed from outside. "Here," she replied, her voice almost inaudible from so much screaming. The sound of metal grinding could be heard as the lock was forced, and then the door slowly opened, letting in the orange light of the late afternoon. The girl raised, her face blinking in the sudden brightness, and it was at that exact moment that the millionaire saw her and froze. The millionaire remained paralyzed in the doorway, as if he had seen a ghost. His face, normally impassive in the most tense meetings, now betrayed his shock. The blood seemed to have drained from his veins. The girl stared at him with wide eyes, deep hazel brown, framed by long eyelashes and delicate eyebrows. The exact same shade of her eyes, the same slightly almond shape, the same sparkle even in the midst of fear. The small aristocratic nose, the chin with that subtle dimple. It was impossible, absolutely impossible. "Who are you?" whispered the millionaire, his voice trembling in a way his partners had never witnessed. The girl shrank further against the wall, afraid of the man's terrified expression. My name is—" she began, but was interrupted by a dry cough. Her throat was raw from so much screaming. The millionaire finally snapped out of his trance. He looked around, surveying the filthy restroom, and felt a wave of nausea. How did this child end up here? And why, through some cosmic cruelty, did she look so much like— "Are you hurt?" he asked, trying to regain control. The girl just nodded, pointing to her bare, wounded feet. There were visible bruises on her thin arms, and her lower lip was cut. An instinct that the millionaire believed had died years ago awakened within him. Slowly, so as not to scare her, he approached and knelt down, ignoring the fact that his Italian linen pants were being ruined by the filthy floor. "Did someone lock you in here?" he asked with a strange gentleness in his usually commanding voice. "A man," she replied, her voice still weak. "I was selling candy at the corner. He said I was messing with his business." The millionaire felt something dark grow inside him. Anger, an emotion he hadn't allowed to dominate him for years. Who would lock a child in a place like that? "How long have you been here?" "Since the sun was high," she replied, pointing to the small window. "Hours." The child had been there for hours, screaming for help that didn't come. A quick decision formed in the millionaire's mind. All his meetings, appointments, and obligations suddenly seemed irrelevant. "I'm going to get you out of here," he said, slowly extending his hand. "Can you walk?" The girl looked at the outstretched hand with distrust. On the streets, she had learned to fear the help of strangers, especially well-dressed men. "Where are you going to take me?" she asked cautiously. The millionaire hesitated. Where indeed? To the police? To some shelter? Something inside him vehemently rejected those options. "To a safe place," he replied, before even processing what he was saying. "I'm going to take care of you." The statement itself surprised him. For 7 years, he hadn't taken care of even himself, just existed, driven by inertia and habit. What was he promising? Still, he extended his hand again, more firmly. The girl looked at it for a few seconds that seemed eternal, then slowly stretched her small, dirty fingers towards him. When their hands touched, the millionaire felt a jolt run through his body. The small hand was warm, despite the cold environment. Alive. Carefully, he helped her to her feet. She could barely stand, her frail legs trembling with the effort. Without a second thought, the millionaire scooped her up in his arms. She weighed less than any child her age should weigh. Her small body trembled slightly against his chest. The millionaire felt the rough texture of her torn and dirty dress, and a wave of protectiveness washed over him, surprising him with its intensity. As they walked out of the abandoned restroom towards the luxury car parked on the street, the sun was setting on the horizon. The golden light bathed them both, creating a scene of stark contrast. The man in the impeccable suit, carrying a child in rags. The millionaire looked at the girl's face, now visible in the natural light, and recognition hit him again like a punch to the gut. She could be the daughter he never got to know, the daughter who died before she was born, the daughter who would be exactly this age now. A small voice in his head warned him. He was entering dangerous territory, letting himself be carried away by emotions long buried. But for the first time in 7 years, he wasn't listening to the voice of reason. The millionaire adjusted the car's temperature to warm the girl, who was now sleeping soundly in the back seat, wrapped in his expensive coat. His fingers trembled as he dialed his personal assistant's number. "Cancel all my appointments for the rest of the week," he ordered without preamble. "Sir?" The assistant's voice sounded confused. In 15 years of working for the millionaire, he had never received such an instruction. You heard me, and have the guest house prepared by—" He hesitated, looking at the sleeping girl in the rearview mirror. "Buy children's clothes for a girl approximately 7 years old, and food, basic medicine." The silence on the other end of the line was almost palpable. "Sir, may I ask what's going on?" "No, you may not," he replied dryly. "Just do what I asked." As he hung up, the millionaire felt a wave of panic. What was he doing? He had just rescued a street child and was taking her to his property. He hadn't notified the authorities, didn't know the legal procedures, knew absolutely nothing about her, except that her face was identical to that of the woman he loved and lost. He hit the steering wheel, furious with himself. He was being irrational, impulsive, everything he had sworn never to be again after the accident. That resemblance was just a cruel coincidence of fate, nothing more. Probably his tired and lonely mind was seeing things, projecting similarities where they didn't exist. The glass mansion loomed on the horizon, imposing against the night sky that was now settling in. The millionaire parked and looked again at the sleeping girl. Her sleep was restless, her face occasionally contorted in expressions of pain or fear. What had this child lived through? Where were her parents? The housekeeper was waiting for him. At the door, her eyes widening as she saw the child in his arms. "Good heavens, sir! Prepare a warm bath," he ordered, passing her, "and see if you can find something she can wear until the new clothes arrive." "But sir, who is—" "Now!" he snapped, heading up the stairs towards the guest suite. As the housekeeper hurried to carry out the orders, the millionaire gently placed the girl on the king-size bed. She seemed even smaller against the luxurious pillows. He stepped back a few paces, watching her. What would he do with her later? Calling social services seemed like the correct procedure, but something inside him refused to consider that possibility. Hours later, the girl was clean, fed, and dressed in a t-shirt that belonged to the millionaire, tied at the waist to serve as a makeshift dress. She had eaten as if she had never seen food before, but remained cautious, looking around like a frightened animal. The millionaire watched her from across the room, keeping his distance. The resemblance was even more striking now that the dirt had been removed. The same face shape, the same dimples when she smiled shyly at the housekeeper who was serving her. "What's your name?" he asked finally, breaking the silence. The girl slowly chewed the last piece of bread before answering. "I don't know my real name. On the streets they call me—" She hesitated as if ashamed. "They call me Mouse." The millionaire's stomach tightened. A cruel nickname for a child. "And your parents?" The girl lowered her eyes. "I never knew them. I grew up with a woman who sold candy. She taught me to sell too since I was little, but she died last winter." Her voice was surprisingly articulate for a street child. "Since then, I've been fending for myself." The millionaire absorbed the information with a mixture of horror and fascination. How did a child survive alone on the streets? "No one took care of you after that woman died?" The girl shrugged, a gesture too adult for her age. "Some people would give me food sometimes, or let me sleep somewhere when it rained a lot." She looked at him with a disconcerting intensity. "Why are you helping me?" The question hit him like a slap in the face. Why indeed? Because she looked like his deceased wife? Because he imagined she could be his unborn daughter? Both answers were disturbing in their irrationality. "I don't know," he replied honestly. Maybe because no one else would. The phone rang, saving him from further questions. It was his personal attorney. "Your housekeeper called me," said the voice on the phone bluntly. "Said you brought a street child home. Is that true?" The millionaire closed his eyes, annoyed by the interference. He should have foreseen that the housekeeper, worried, would contact the attorney. "It's my business. It's a legal matter," the attorney corrected. "You can't just pick up a child off the street and keep her in your house. There are procedures, laws." "I understand that." "No, You clearly don't. I'm on my way there now. Don't do anything until I arrive." The millionaire hung up without answering. He looked at the girl, who was now watching him with apprehension, as if she could sense the change in his mood. "I'm going to have to take you somewhere else tomorrow," he said, the words coming out with difficulty. "You don't want me here," she stated, without surprise or anger. Just an acceptance that broke the millionaire's heart into 1,000 pieces. "It's not that," he tried to explain. It's complicated." "It's okay," she replied with a maturity disproportionate to her age. "I'm used to not staying in the same place for too long." Something broke inside the millionaire at that moment. The carefully constructed barrier around his heart suffered its first crack in 7 years. The lawyer arrived shortly after nightfall, carrying a briefcase full of documents and a serious expression that the millionaire knew well. It was the same expression he had used during the probate process after his wife's death. "Where's the child?" he asked as soon as he entered the study. "Resting," replied the millionaire, pouring himself a glass of whiskey. "I don't want her bothered." "I should be bothered. You should be bothered." The lawyer placed the briefcase on the mahogany desk. "What exactly do you intend to do?" The millionaire stared at the amber liquid in his glass, thoughtful. "I don't know yet." "Then allow me to clarify your legal options. First, we must notify the authorities immediately. Second, this child needs to be turned over to social services or—" "She has her face," interrupted the millionaire, almost in a whisper. The lawyer stopped, confused. "Whose?" "Hers. My wife." A heavy silence settled in the study. The lawyer assumed an expression of genuine concern. "You can't be serious." "Oh, see for yourself," said the millionaire, opening the study door and gesturing for the lawyer to follow him. The two men walked silently through the mansion's corridors until they reached the guest room. The millionaire opened the door softly. The girl slept peacefully, her face serene against the white pillows. The soft light from the bedside lamp illuminated her delicate features. The lawyer observed the child for a few moments, then turned to the millionaire with an expression that mixed compassion and concern. "I don't see what you see," he said quietly, closing the door. "I know the loss was devastating, but—" "I'm not crazy," replied the millionaire, irritated. "The resemblance is real. Even if it is, that doesn't change the facts." The lawyer placed a hand on the millionaire's shoulder. "This child has a family somewhere. Parents, relatives. We can't just ignore that." The millionaire stepped away from the touch, returning to the study. "What if she doesn't?" Then there are legal procedures for adoption," replied the lawyer, following him. "But you need to understand that this would take time. Investigations, psychological evaluations, proof of ability to be a guardian." "I'm one of the most powerful men in this country," cut in the millionaire. "Surely I can expedite some processes." The lawyer stared at him sternly. "Are you suggesting I bribe public officials?" "I'm suggesting you do your job and find a legal way to keep her here, under my guardianship, while we investigate her past." The lawyer sighed, recognizing the determination in his client's face. "I'll see what I can do, but it will be necessary to file a police report about how you found her. And she'll have to undergo medical examinations." The millionaire nodded, satisfied with the small progress. The next morning, the girl woke up disoriented, momentarily confused to see the high ceiling and the spacious room around her. It took a few seconds for the memory of the previous day to return. The abandoned restroom, the rescue, the rich man who had brought her to this house. She sat up in bed, watching the rays of sunlight that entered through the partially open curtains. She had never slept in a place so beautiful, or so clean, or so quiet. The door opened softly, and the housekeeper entered, carrying a breakfast tray. "Good morning, sweetie," said the woman with a gentle smile. "Did you sleep well?" The girl, nodded shyly, her eyes fixed on the tray filled with foods she had never seen together in one meal. Is he still here?" she asked, her voice revealing a mixture of hope and fear. "Yes, he's in the study." The housekeeper placed the tray on the bed. "He asked me to let him know when you woke up." While the girl ate, marveling at each new flavor, the housekeeper sorted the newly arrived clothes, dresses, pants, blouses, shoes, all in varying sizes to ensure that something would fit. "Did he buy all this for me?" asked the girl, incredulous. "He had it bought, yes," replied the housekeeper with a smile. "Now how about we try on some of these clothes after breakfast?" An hour later, dressed in a simple blue dress and shoes that actually fit her feet, the girl was led to the study. The millionaire awaited her, sitting behind his imposing desk, looking even more intimidating in the daylight. He looked up from the papers he was analyzing and, for a moment, seemed to lose his breath as he saw her. Clean, fed, and properly dressed, the resemblance to his deceased wife was even more pronounced. "Good morning," he said, trying to soften his normally commanding voice. "I hope you slept well." The girl nodded, standing at the door, unsure of how to proceed. "Come in," he invited. "We need to talk." She approached cautiously and sat in the chair indicated, her legs swinging without reaching the floor. "My lawyer was here yesterday," began the millionaire. "Legally, I should turn you over to social services." The girl lowered her eyes, already expecting this conclusion. "But," he continued, "we managed to get temporary guardianship while we investigate your case." She looked up, surprised. "What does that mean?" "It means you can stay here for now, with me." The girl studied him with her perceptive eyes, as if trying to detect some lie or trap. "Why?" she asked again, the same question as the night before. "Why do you want me to stay?" The millionaire stood up, walked to the window, and turned, his back to her, looking at the impeccable garden outside. "Because I have questions," he replied finally, "about you. About where you came from, and I think you have questions too, don't you?" The girl nodded slowly, although he couldn't see. "So that's what we'll do," decided the millionaire, turning to face her. "We'll look for answers together." The days turned into weeks, and an unlikely routine was established. Every morning, the millionaire had coffee with the girl before going to the office. In the afternoon, upon returning, he spent hours listening to her tell about her day, the lessons with the private tutor he had hired, the books she was discovering, the flowers she had planted in the garden with the help of the housekeeper. That's how he learned fragments of her story, how she had lived on the streets for as long as she could remember, how she had learned to read by observing the advertisements at the bus stops, how despite everything, she maintained an insatiable curiosity about the world. "You never attended a school?" asked the millionaire one afternoon as they walked through the garden. "No, sir," replied the girl, bending down to examine a butterfly perched on a flower. "The woman who took care of me said school doesn't fill your belly." The millionaire felt a knot of indignation form in his throat. This woman, whom the girl occasionally called aunt, seemed to have been more of an exploiter than a caregiver. He still didn't know exactly how the girl had ended up with her, or if there was any real blood tie between the two. "Do you enjoy studying with the tutor I hired?" The girl nodded vigorously, a smile lighting up her face. "It's the best thing in the world. I knew how to read a little, but now I'm learning math and science and history." Her eyes sparkled. "Did you know there are planets beyond Earth? Entire worlds spinning in space?" The millionaire couldn't suppress a smile. The girl's thirst for knowledge was contagious. It was as if, after years of deprivation, she was hungry to learn. The lawyer continued his investigation, but progress was slow. There was no birth certificate with the girl's description on the approximate date. No missing child case that matched her characteristics. It was as if she had simply appeared out of nowhere. "Maybe we should hire a private investigator," suggested the lawyer on one of his regular visits. The millionaire hesitated. Part of him feared what a detective might discover. What if they found biological parents who claimed her? Or worse, what if they discovered some real connection to his deceased wife? Not yet, he decided. Let's continue with the official searches for now. Meanwhile, the girl's transformation was visible. Her eyes, once cautious, now shone with curiosity. Her frail body gained weight and strength with proper nutrition, and her voice, once almost inaudible, now filled the rooms of the mansion with questions, observations, and occasionally laughter. The mansion itself seemed to transform. Where a sepulchral silence once reigned, there was now life. The housekeeper smiled more. The gardeners stopped to show interesting flowers to the curious little girl. Even the driver, a normally taciturn man, was seen teaching her to play chess on the terrace. The millionaire watched these changes with a mixture of awe and trepidation. Exactly what he feared most was happening. He was becoming attached, more and more each day. The girl was filling a void that he had spent years trying to ignore. One night, while reading a book to her before bed, a ritual they started almost without realizing it, the girl asked a question that caught him by surprise. "You lost someone important, didn't you?" The millionaire stopped reading, stunned. "Why do you ask that?" The girl settled in bed, staring at him with those eyes that seemed to see through his soul. "Because you have a lot of pictures stored in the drawers. I saw them when I was looking for a pencil in your study." "Sorry," she added quickly, fearing she had crossed some boundary. The millionaire closed the book slowly. The photos. He had taken them off the walls and tables after the accident, unable to look at her face every day. But he hadn't had the courage to get rid of them. "Yes," he replied finally. "I lost my wife and the baby we were expecting." The girl nodded, as if confirming a suspicion. "Was that why you froze when you saw me in that restroom? Because I look like her?" The millionaire felt a chill. How could a 7-year-old be so perceptive? "Yes," he admitted, unable to lie before that gaze. "You look a lot like her." The girl was silent for a few moments, processing the information. "Does it make you sad to look at me and remember her?" "No," replied the millionaire, surprised by his own honesty. "In the beginning, maybe, but now it's like part of her is here somehow." Something in the girl's gaze changed. A kind of silent understanding passed between the two. An invisible bond that was beginning to strengthen. "Can I see a picture of her?" she asked timidly. The millionaire hesitated. In 7 years, he hadn't shown those photos to anyone. They were his private memories, his hidden treasure. But looking into the girl's expectant eyes, he felt the barrier around his heart give way even further. "Tomorrow," he promised, closing the book. "Now it's time to sleep." He leaned over to turn off the bedside lamp, but the girl's small hand held his. "Thank you," she whispered, "for saving me from that place." The millionaire felt a lump in his throat. "You're welcome," he replied simply. Time, which once dragged on for the millionaire, now seemed to pass too quickly. 3 months had passed since he found the girl in that abandoned restroom. 3 months of subtle and profound transformations in the glass mansion, which now housed laughter, drawings taped to the refrigerator, and occasional small, muddy footprints in the immaculate hallways. The lawyer continued his investigations, now with the help of a private investigator whom the millionaire had finally agreed to hire. The mystery of the girl's origin consumed them. How could a child with such distinct features, so similar to those of the millionaire's deceased wife, simply exist without leaving a trace in the system? One rainy morning, while the girl was having a lesson with her private tutor in the library, the millionaire's phone rang. "We need to talk," said the lawyer, his voice strained. "Now." An hour later, the two men were sitting in the mansion's study, a thick folder on the desk between them. "What did you find?" asked the millionaire, trying to remain calm in the face of the lawyer's grave expression. Something that seems impossible. The lawyer opened the folder. The detective finally gained access to the records of a private hospital that closed 5 years ago. He found this. He pushed a document towards the millionaire. It was a birth certificate dated 7 years ago. The mother's name made the millionaire's blood run cold. It was his wife's name. "Is this some kind of joke?" he asked, his voice hoarse with emotion. "No," replied the lawyer, pushing another document. "And there's more. A medical record from the day of the accident. Your wife was taken alive to this hospital after the collision. Only later was she transferred to the hospital where you were." The millionaire could barely breathe. He read and reread the documents, trying to assimilate what he saw. "They said the baby died on impact," he whispered, the memory of that terrible day returning with full force. "Apparently, that's not what happened." The lawyer hesitated before continuing. "According to the records, the baby, a girl, was delivered by emergency C-section while your wife was still alive. She passed away minutes later. And the child disappeared." The lawyer pushed another document forward. "The hospital registered the birth, but after that, nothing. No record of death, no official transfer." The millionaire felt as if the world were collapsing around him. It was impossible. And yet, it would explain everything. The striking resemblance, the inexplicable connection he had felt from the first moment, even the exact age. "Are you saying she—" He couldn't complete the sentence. The thought was both too disturbing and too wonderful. "I'm saying there's a possibility," replied the lawyer carefully. "We need a DNA test to confirm, but the indications are strong. Some nurses were investigated for baby selling at the time, although the case was closed for lack of evidence." The millionaire stood up abruptly, walking to the window. Outside, the rain fell relentlessly, blurring the view of the garden. "All these years," he murmured, "all these years, believing I lost her along with my wife." "We can't be sure yet," warned the lawyer. "But if it's true, if the girl is really your biological daughter, it changes everything." The millionaire turned, a steely determination in his gaze. "I want the DNA test. Today." "I've already arranged it," replied the lawyer. "A doctor will be here in an hour. But we need to discuss how we're going to approach this with her." The millionaire nodded, trying to organize his thoughts amid the emotional storm that was raging within him. "She has the right to know the truth," he said finally, "but we need to be sure first." When the doctor arrived, the millionaire explained to the girl that they needed to do a small exam, just a swab inside her cheek. She agreed without question, trusting him in a way that made his heart ache. The 3 days of waiting for the test results were the longest in the millionaire's life. He could barely sleep, alternating between delirious hope and the terror of being wrong, of having built a fantasy based on coincidences and desire. On the night of the 3rd day, while the girl slept, the lawyer returned to the mansion, carrying a sealed envelope. "It's here," he said, handing the envelope to the millionaire. With trembling hands, he opened the document and read the result. Compatibility, 99.99998%. The girl was his daughter. The millionaire felt tears streaming down his face, unable to contain them. 7 years of mourning, 7 years believing he had lost everything, when in fact his daughter was alive, alone in the world, fighting to survive. "It's her," he said, his voice choked with emotion. "She's my daughter." The lawyer, normally restrained, placed a hand on the millionaire's shoulder. "Congratulations," he said simply. "What do we do now?" The millionaire wiped away the tears, a fierce determination taking over him. "First, I want to know exactly what happened. Who took her from the hospital, how she ended up on the streets. We're already investigating. The detective is following the trail of a nurse who worked at the hospital at the time and disappeared soon after. And what about the man who locked her in that restroom? I want that monster behind bars. The police are looking for him, based on the description she gave. The millionaire nodded, satisfied with the progress, but his mind was already elsewhere, in the room where his daughter slept, unaware that her life was about to change completely again. "How am I going to tell her?" he asked, more to himself than to the lawyer. "Carefully," replied the other man. "It's a powerful revelation for anyone, even more so for a child." That night, the millionaire couldn't sleep. He sat on the porch, looking at the stars, thinking about his wife. Had she died believing that her daughter had died too? Or had she known in her last moments that the baby had survived? And how would he face the girl, his daughter, the next morning? Dawn found him still awake with the decision made. He would tell her everything today. She deserved the truth, however complex and painful it might be. When the girl came down for breakfast, he knew that she had immediately perceived that something had changed. Her observant eyes, her mother's eyes, caught the tension in the air, the way the adults were looking at her. "Did something happen?" she asked hesitantly. The millionaire took a deep breath. "Yes," he replied. "We discovered something very important about you, about us." The girl looked at him, her big eyes fixed on him, waiting. The housekeeper, who had already been informed, discreetly left the room, leaving them alone. "Do you remember when I told you about my wife? About the baby we were expecting?" The girl nodded slowly. "What happened to your baby?" she asked, with the heart-wrenching innocence of a child. The millionaire felt the words catch in his throat. How to explain? How to make a 7-year-old understand? "For a long time," he began, choosing his words carefully, "I believed that my baby had died along with my wife." The girl tilted her head, confused. "But she didn't die?" "No," he replied, his heart pounding. "The baby was born, a girl, and that girl is you." The girl looked at the millionaire, her eyes wide with complete confusion. For a long moment, no word was spoken. The silence in the dining room was absolute, except for the ticking of the antique clock in the corner. "I am your daughter," she repeated finally, her voice almost a whisper. The millionaire nodded, unable to speak, the emotion blocking his throat. He reached across the table, offering the documents that proved what he had just said. "The doctors did a test," he explained when he finally recovered his voice. "That's why we collected that sample from your cheek, remember? The result proves that you're my biological daughter." The girl frowned, trying to process information too complex for her age. "But how did I end up on the street? Why didn't you know where I was?" The question was devastating in its simplicity. The millionaire felt a wave of guilt so intense that he almost couldn't breathe. For 7 years, his daughter had been alive, alone, suffering, while he lived in his glass mansion, drowning in self-pity. "Someone took you from the hospital after you were born," he said with difficulty. "They told me that you had died along with your mother. I believed it for all these years." The girl was silent, absorbing those words. Her small face showed a battle of emotions, confusion, shock, maybe even a spark of hope. "And now?" she asked finally. "Now," replied the millionaire. "Now you can stay here with me forever. This is your home. I am..." He hesitated, the word seeming enormous and frightening. "I am your father." The girl lowered her eyes to her breakfast plate, now cold and forgotten. When she raised her face again, tears were streaming silently down her cheeks. "The woman who took care of me," she said, her voice trembling. "She once told me that my real mother sold me because she didn't want me, that no one ever wanted me." The millionaire felt his heart shatter. He stood up abruptly and went around the table, kneeling next to the girl's chair. "That's a terrible lie," he said, holding her small hands in his. "Your mother loved you, I loved you. We were waiting for you. We planned everything, your room, your name, your life with us. We were robbed from each other." For the first time since the rescue, the girl threw herself into his arms, sobbing openly. The millionaire hugged her tightly, his own eyes wet with tears. It was in that moment of revelation and reconnection that the phone rang. The housekeeper answered and, with a worried expression, entered the dining room. "Sir, it's the lawyer. He says it's urgent." Reluctantly, the millionaire released the girl and took the phone. "What is it?" "We have problems," replied the lawyer, his voice strained. "Your cousin found out about the girl and the DNA test. He's contesting the guardianship and requesting an investigation for fraud." "What? On what grounds?" "He claims that you've been emotionally unstable since your wife's death, that you fabricated this story about the girl being your daughter to fill the void, and that you're using your influence to falsify documents and tests." The millionaire felt a chill of anger. His cousin, a secondary heir to his fortune, had always waited in the wings, hoping for an opportunity to question his sanity after his bereavement. That's absurd. Maybe, but he managed to get a preliminary hearing. And worse, he leaked the story to the press. As if to confirm, the millionaire's cell phone began to vibrate with notifications. Reporters were already at the gate of the mansion, clamoring for a statement about the surprising discovery of the lost heiress. "Keep them away," he ordered the head of security, turning off the cell phone. "Reinforce security. No one enters or leaves without my express authorization." The girl watched everything with frightened eyes, sensing the growing tension. The millionaire tried to smile to reassure her, but the smile didn't reach his worried eyes. "Everything's okay," he lied. "Just some complications we need to sort out." But that night, when the girl was already in bed, the lawyer brought even more disturbing news. "The judge has scheduled an emergency hearing for tomorrow," he informed, and ordered the girl's presence. "She just found out I'm her father," protested the millionaire. "I'm not going to subject her to a courtroom full of strangers asking questions." "We have no choice," replied the lawyer gravely. "If we don't take her, the judge may order that she be temporarily placed in state custody until the case is resolved." The millionaire spent the night awake, alternating between anger and fear. For the first time in years, he felt truly alive, and absolutely terrified of the possibility of losing his newfound daughter. The next morning, as they prepared for court, he knelt before the girl, adjusting the coat of the simple dress they had chosen for the occasion. "It's going to be all right," he promised, trying to convey a confidence he didn't feel. "We just need to tell the truth, that I found you, that we discovered you're my daughter, and that we want to be together." The girl nodded, serious. In her 7 years of life on the streets, she had learned to read people. She knew that the millionaire, her father, was scared, even if he tried to hide it. "What if they don't believe us?" she asked, voicing the fear that hung between them. The millionaire swallowed hard. "We'll make them believe us," he replied, trying to sound more confident than he felt. When they left the mansion, they were greeted by an army of reporters and photographers. Flashes flashed, questions were shouted. The millionaire protected the girl with his body, keeping her close as security guards cleared a path to the car. "Is it true that you bought the girl from child traffickers? Is the lost daughter story a hoax to improve your public image? How much did it cost to falsify the DNA test?" The questions were cruel, sensationalist. The millionaire kept his face impassive, focused only on getting to the car safely. But one question, launched by a particularly insistent reporter, pierced the shield. Why would a child want to live with a man who didn't even protect his own wife? The millionaire froze, the words hitting him like a physical blow. The girl felt his body stiffen, his breathing falter. She looked at her father, then at the reporter, her eyes narrowing with a fury surprising for someone so small. At that moment, one of the security guards finally managed to open the car door, and they escaped the tumult into the silent interior of the armored vehicle. But the damage was done. Throughout the journey to the court, the millionaire remained silent, the reporter's words echoing in his mind. Would a child really be happier with him? A man marked by guilt, who had spent 7 years wallowing in bitterness. What kind of father would he be to her? It's not true, you know. The girl's voice brought him back to the present. He turned to her, confused. What? What that man said, she replied, looking at him seriously. About you not protecting your wife. Accidents happen. It's not your fault. The millionaire felt tears stinging his eyes. In her childish wisdom, born from growing up too fast, she had identified exactly what had tormented him for 7 years. How do you know that? He asked, his voice hoarse. The girl shrugged. Your eyes. They get sad when you talk about her, like you want to go back in time and do something different. The car stopped in front of the courthouse, where another group of reporters awaited. The lawyer who had met them at the entrance instructed them to use a side entrance to avoid the tumult. As they walked through the austere corridors of the courthouse, the millionaire felt a growing weight on his chest. For the first time since he had found the girl, the possibility of losing her became concrete, palpable. The fear was almost paralyzing. The courtroom was more crowded than usual for a family case. Besides the lawyers and court officials, there were journalists in the back, some with notepads, anxiously awaiting the unfolding of the drama. The judge, a middle-aged man with piercing eyes, surveyed those present with a stern expression before banging the gavel, calling the court to order. This court is convened to assess the request for temporary custody of the minor whose identity is being contested, he formally announced. I would like to remind everyone that despite the public interest in this case, the child's welfare is our sole priority. The millionaire sat rigidly beside his lawyer, trying to keep his expression neutral. Across the courtroom, his cousin stared at him with a confident smirk. Beside him, a woman in a stern suit, his lawyer, known for her aggressiveness in high-profile cases. The girl had been taken to a separate room where she would be interviewed by a social worker before appearing before the judge. The millionaire felt her absence like a physical ache. The cousin's lawyer was the first to speak. Your Honor, we are dealing with a case of emotional and potentially legal fraud, she began, her voice cutting through the air like a razor. My client is deeply concerned about the mental state of his cousin, who has never fully recovered from the tragic loss of his wife 7 years ago. She paused dramatically, feigning empathy. We understand his pain. We truly do. But to invent a daughter, to forge DNA tests, that goes beyond grief. It's behavior that requires intervention. The millionaire's lawyer stood up, indignant. These are serious and completely unfounded accusations, Your Honor. We have official documentation from the hospital confirming the child's birth. We have the DNA test performed by a reputable and independent laboratory. There is absolutely no evidence of fraud. The cousin's lawyer smiled, as if she had expected exactly that response. Documents from a conveniently closed hospital. A DNA test that can easily be manipulated when one has the financial resources of my client. And most suspicious of all, the miraculous reunion with this child, who by some extraordinary coincidence ended up locked in an abandoned restroom right on the route of her supposed father. The millionaire felt the blood boil in his veins. To manipulate the circumstances of meeting his daughter as if it were an elaborate conspiracy was more than he could bear. That's absurd, he said, ignoring protocol and standing up abruptly. Sir, please address the court only when requested, admonished the judge, although his tone was more of a warning than a reprimand. The millionaire nodded, forcing himself to sit down again. The hearing proceeded with arguments and counter-arguments. Experts were called to discuss the reliability of DNA tests. A social worker presented a preliminary report on the girl's adaptation to the millionaire's home, noting her positive progress but expressing concern about the unconventional situation. Finally, the moment that the millionaire feared most arrived: the girl's testimony. When she entered, she seemed even smaller in the broad, formal setting of the courtroom. Her simple dress, chosen not to appear pretentious or sloppy, contrasted with the dark wood and solemn marble of the environment. She sat in the designated chair, her legs swinging without reaching the floor. The judge softened his expression, leaning forward slightly. "Hello," he said gently. "I understand that this must be a strange situation for you. I need to ask you some questions, and I want you to answer honestly, okay? There are no right or wrong answers." The girl nodded, her eyes flitting briefly to the millionaire before fixing on the judge. "Do you know why you're here today?" asked the magistrate. "Because some people don't believe he's my father," she replied with surprising clarity. "And what do you think about that?" The girl hesitated, looking at her hands for a moment. "I don't know if he's my real father," she said finally. "I just know that he saved me from that dark place, and that since then, he's taken care of me better than anyone ever has." The courtroom was in absolute silence, all attention focused on the small figure in the witness chair. "He gave me food and clean clothes. He gave me a soft bed and books. He taught me that I can learn, that I can be someone." Her voice, normally soft, resonated with an unexpected strength. "Before him, I didn't exist for anyone." The cousin's lawyer stood up, her tone falsely sweet. "Honey, don't you think it's strange that he was just in that abandoned place? Hasn't it occurred to you that maybe he set it all up?" The millionaire's lawyer began to protest, but the girl answered before the judge could intervene. "On the streets, I learned to know when someone is lying," she said, looking directly at the lawyer. "When someone wants to hurt me, he's not lying. The man sitting on the other side," she pointed to the millionaire's cousin, "he's the one with eyes that lie." A murmur ran through the room. The cousin shifted, visibly uncomfortable under the child's piercing gaze. The judge called for silence before asking his final question. "What do you want? If you could choose, what would you wish to happen now?" The girl didn't hesitate. "I want to stay with him," she replied, pointing to the millionaire. "I want to be able to call him Dad. I want to learn more things. I want to plant more flowers in the garden." There was a pause, and then she added in a lower voice, "I want him to smile more." An emotional silence hung over the courtroom. The millionaire felt something break and rebuild within him simultaneously. The barrier erected around his heart over the past 7 years crumbled completely, leaving in its place a fierce determination to protect this child, his daughter, at any cost. When the judge announced a recess to deliberate, the lawyer turned to the millionaire with a contained smile. "She was extraordinary," he said quietly, "more eloquent than any adult could be." The millionaire merely nodded, unable to speak. His eyes were fixed on the small figure who was now being led back to the waiting room. "What happens if we lose?" he asked finally, forcing the words out. The lawyer hesitated. "If we lose temporary custody, she'll probably be placed in state care, pending the outcome of the investigation. A few weeks, maybe months." The millionaire closed his eyes. The idea of his daughter in an impersonal shelter, after everything she had already suffered, was unbearable. "I won't allow that," he said, with a determination that surprised even his lawyer. "We'll do everything we can, but we need to be prepared for all possibilities," replied the lawyer cautiously. When the judge returned to the room, his face revealed nothing about his decision. The entire courtroom held its breath. "This is an extremely unusual case," the magistrate began. "On the one hand, we have serious accusations of fraud and manipulation. On the other, we have hospital documents and test results that to date appear legitimate." He paused, his eyes sweeping across the room. "What impresses me most, however, is the child's testimony. I have rarely seen someone so young speak with such clarity and conviction." The millionaire felt a glimmer of hope emerge. "Considering all the available elements," continued the judge, "I determined that, pending a full investigation, the minor will remain under the temporary guardianship of the petitioner. However," he added, before either side could show satisfaction or disappointment, "with weekly supervision by social services and the express condition that the child not be removed from the jurisdiction of this court." Relief washed over the millionaire like a physical wave. Beside him, his lawyer smiled discreetly. Across the room, his cousin rose abruptly and left, followed by his lawyer, who looked furious. "Court adjourned," declared the judge, banging the gavel. Outside the courthouse, away from the reporters who were now crowding the main entrance, the millionaire waited anxiously. When the door opened and the girl appeared, accompanied by the social worker, he knelt down, opening his arms. Without hesitation, she ran to him, throwing herself into his embrace. The millionaire lifted her up, holding her as if she were the most precious thing in the world, and to him she was. "Let's go home," he whispered, his voice choked with emotion. During the ride back, in the sheltered silence of the car, the girl snuggled next to the millionaire, exhausted by the tension of the day. "What happens now?" she asked, her eyes already heavy with sleep. "Now," he replied, running his hand through her hair, "now we really begin. Together." Back at the mansion, while the girl slept soundly after the exhausting day, the millionaire met with his lawyer and the private investigator in the study. "I want results," he said, his voice now charged with a renewed authority. "I want to know exactly how my daughter was taken from the hospital, who was involved, and why I was told she was dead." The detective nodded, leafing through his notes. "We already have some leads. The nurse who disappeared after your daughter's birth has been located in another state. She's living under a false name, but we were able to track her through employment. Her records. I'll be interrogating her in the next few days." "And what about the woman who raised the girl in the early years, the so-called aunt?" "Still gathering information, but based on what your daughter told us, we suspect she's part of a network that exploits children for begging. It wouldn't be the first time babies are bought for that purpose." The millionaire felt the anger rise again, but now it was different. No longer the impotent rage that had consumed him for years, but a cold and controlled determination. "I want that network taken down," he declared, "completely. Use all the resources necessary. Hire more. Detectives, do whatever it takes." The lawyer exchanged a meaningful glance with the detective before addressing the millionaire. "There's something else we should discuss," he said cautiously. "Your daughter doesn't have an official name yet. Legally, I mean. To finalize the paperwork, we'll need to register her." The millionaire was silent for a moment. In his mind, he had always known what his daughter's name would be, the name that he and his wife had chosen 7 years before, when they dreamed of the future. "She'll have the name her mother chose," he said finally, "and our last name." The next morning, while they were having breakfast together, the millionaire mentioned the subject of the name to the girl. "You know," he began casually, "everyone needs to have an official name, for school, for documents, for the world." The girl looked at him, curious. "Can I choose any name?" "Well," he hesitated, "actually, your mother and I, before you were born, had already chosen a name. But you don't have to use it if you don't like it." "What is it?" she asked, her eyes shining with curiosity. When he said the name, the girl repeated it slowly, testing how it sounded in her mouth. Then a smile lit up her face. "It's beautiful," she declared. "I want that name." Something warm and comforting spread through the millionaire's chest. Amid the chaos of the past few days, that small moment of connection felt like a miracle. "And your last name will be mine," he added. "You're my daughter, after all." She smiled again, even more radiant. "Your daughter," she repeated, as if testing the idea. "And you're my father." The millionaire felt tears in his eyes, but this time they were tears of joy. For the first time in 7 years, he felt a real purpose, a reason to live beyond mere existence. In the days that followed, a new routine was established in the mansion. The girl, now officially with a name, although for many she was still the millionaire's daughter, continued her lessons, now with an educational program specially designed to help her overcome the lost years. The millionaire, in turn, readjusted his professional life to be more present. He found himself declining meetings that he would previously consider indispensable, delegating tasks that he would previously insist on supervising personally. His priority now was clear. His daughter came first. The relationship between the two deepened with each passing day. He learned to be a father, to listen not only with his ears, but with his heart, to show patience in the face of small difficulties, to celebrate small achievements. She learned to trust, to lower the defenses erected by years of survival. On the streets, to believe that love could be unconditional. A week after the hearing, the private investigator returned with new information. The ex-nurse had confessed everything, how she had been paid to declare the baby dead, how she had delivered her to intermediaries who, in turn, sold her to the child exploitation network. "She provided names," reported the detective. "We're working with the police now. Several arrest warrants have already been issued." The millionaire nodded gravely. "And the man who locked my daughter in the restroom?" "Located and arrested yesterday. He was part of the same network." He considered the girl less profitable since she started to grow, and passers-by were less inclined to give money. The wave of anger that the millionaire felt was quickly replaced by an even stronger determination. "I want to use my resources to help other children," he declared. "I want to create a foundation to identify and rescue exploited children, to reunite separated families." The lawyer smiled, genuinely impressed with his client's transformation. "It's an excellent project," he agreed. "And I can say, if I may offer a personal observation, that I've never seen you so alive." The millionaire reflected on the comment. It was true. In the 7 years after the accident, he had existed as a shadow, moving through the world without truly participating in it. Now each morning brought a new purpose, each night a new gratitude. That same evening, the millionaire found his daughter in the library, engrossed in a large world atlas, her small fingers tracing the shapes of the continents. "What are you exploring?" he asked, sitting down beside her. "All the places that exist," she replied, her face lit up by curiosity. "There are so many. One day I want to visit them all." "And maybe we can start with a few," he suggested, smiling. "When all this calms down, you can choose the first." She looked at him, her eyes, her mother's eyes, shining with hope. "Promise?" "I promise," he replied, realizing that he would do anything to keep that spark alive in her eyes. It was then that he knew with a certainty that transcended any doubt. Despite all the battles they would still face, despite the cousin who continued to contest the guardianship, despite the reporters still occasionally camped out at the gates, they would win, together. The day of the final hearing arrived faster than the millionaire expected. 3 months had passed since the first encounter in court. 3 months of weekly visits from social workers, of constant investigations, of sensational headlines that gradually diminished as new scandals took their place. 3 months during which the bond between father and daughter had strengthened beyond all expectation. "Are we ready for this?" asked the girl as the millionaire adjusted his tie in front of the mirror. He turned, surprised not only by the question, but by the calmness with which she had asked it. She was no longer the frightened child he had found in that abandoned restroom. In her simple but elegant dress, with her hair neatly combed and her eyes shining with intelligence, she seemed older than her 7 years, as if the experiences she had lived had accelerated her growth in certain aspects. "We're more than ready," he replied, kneeling to be at her eye level. "We have the truth on our side and each other." She nodded, serious, but a small smile played on her lips. "The tutor said I'm learning faster than any student she's ever had," she commented, changing the subject with the ease typical of children. "She said I can enter regular school next semester, maybe even in an advanced class." The pride that the millionaire felt at that moment was indescribable. Despite all the obstacles, despite the trauma and deprivation, his daughter was flourishing. Her resilience was a daily miracle that he witnessed with reverence. "That's wonderful," he said, hugging her briefly. "When all this is over, we'll have a big celebration. You can choose how." In court, the atmosphere was different from the first hearing. The press was present, but in smaller numbers. The judge, the same as in the previous hearing, seemed more relaxed, perhaps because he now had facts before him, not just allegations. The millionaire's cousin was there, his face a mask of forced determination. Beside him, a new lawyer. The previous one had apparently abandoned the case after the first results of the investigations came to light. "The court is in session," announced the judge, banging the gavel softly. "This court convenes today to determine the permanent guardianship of the minor. In the past 3 months, we have had the opportunity to investigate the extraordinary circumstances of this case. Today, we will hear the findings." The district attorney, who had now taken over the investigation, rose with a thick folder in his hands. "Your Honor, the facts are now clear. Through testimonies, hospital records, and criminal investigation, we have managed to reconstruct the events of 7 years ago." He then proceeded to detail the conspiracy that had separated father and daughter, how the nurse, in collusion with a doctor, now deceased, had falsified the death certificate of the newborn and delivered her to a child trafficking network. How that network, in turn, had sold the baby to a woman who used children for begging. How after the death of that woman, the girl had survived alone on the streets until the fateful day when she was locked in that public restroom. "DNA doesn't lie, Your Honor," concluded the district attorney. "And in this case, science only confirms what fate somehow has already brought together. This child is, without any shadow of a doubt, the biological daughter of the petitioner." The cousin's new lawyer tried to argue that, despite the confirmed paternity, the millionaire would not be suitable as a guardian due to his emotional history after the loss of his wife. She cited testimonies from former employees about his isolation and obsessive behavior with work. "A child needs more than financial resources, Your Honor," she argued. "She needs emotional stability, something that the petitioner has not demonstrated." In the past 7 years, the millionaire's lawyer prepared to object, but the judge raised his hand, silencing him. "I would like to hear from the petitioner himself," he said, surprising everyone. "Sir, could you explain to the court, in your own words, how you found the minor and what has changed in your life since then?" The millionaire stood up slowly, feeling the weight of all eyes. For a moment, he hesitated. He was not a man of words. He had always preferred actions. But then, he saw his daughter sitting quietly beside the social worker, her eyes fixed on him with complete trust, and he found his voice. "Your Honor, I died 7 years ago," he began, his voice low but clear. "Not physically, of course, but in every sense that matters. When I lost my wife and believed I had lost our daughter, something fundamental broke inside me. The courtroom was in complete silence. In the years that followed, I lived like a ghost. I built more wealth, yes. I expanded companies. I closed deals, but I wasn't really living, until that day when a detour led me to a neighborhood I would normally avoid. He paused, taking a deep breath. I heard a cry, weak, distant. I could easily have ignored it. The man I was at that moment would have ignored it. But something made me stop, made me follow that sound to an abandoned public restroom. His gaze met his daughter's again, and a small smile appeared on his face. When I opened that door, I didn't know I was about to find a reason to live again. I didn't know I was about to rediscover my daughter, who fate or God or whatever force exists had somehow placed in my path. He turned to the judge. Discovering that she's my biological daughter was a miracle that still leaves me speechless. But even before that, even when she was just an unknown child in need of help, something had already changed in me. For the first time in 7 years, I cared about something beyond my own pain. His eyes flicked briefly to his cousin, who now looked uncomfortable. Some say I'm not emotionally stable enough to raise a child. Maybe the man I was a few months ago wasn't. But the truth, Your Honor, is that my daughter saved me as much as I saved her. She taught me to live again, to feel something beyond grief and guilt. The millionaire then did something unexpected. He walked to where his daughter was sitting and knelt before her. I promise this court, and more importantly, I promise my daughter, I will dedicate every day of my life to being the father she deserves, to ensuring that she never again feels cold or hungry or afraid, to supporting her in everything she wants to learn and explore, to loving her unconditionally as I know her mother would have loved her. As he spoke those last words, the millionaire couldn't hold back the tears that began to stream down his face. His daughter, in a spontaneous gesture that surprised everyone, reached out her small hand and gently wiped them away. "Don't cry, Dad," she said, her voice clear enough to be heard throughout the silent courtroom. "We're together now." The impact of that simple moment, of that pure demonstration of love and connection, was palpable in the air. The judge cleared his throat, visibly moved. "I believe we have seen enough," he said after a moment. "This court is ready to issue its decision." The silence that followed was almost solid, filling every corner of the room. The millionaire returned to his seat, his heart pounding, his hand instinctively reaching for his daughter's. Based on the evidence presented, the reports from social services, the results of the criminal investigation, and yes, what I have witnessed today in this courtroom, the judge paused, looking directly at the millionaire and his daughter. I grant permanent and sole custody of the minor to her biological father, with all the rights and responsibilities that this implies. The sound of the gavel banging resonated like music. The millionaire felt a weight of years being lifted from his shoulders, replaced by the sweetest and most welcome responsibility he had ever known. His cousin stood up abruptly and left the room without looking back, his lawyer following with a defeated expression, but the millionaire barely noticed. His entire world was focused on the small figure beside him, who was now smiling openly, her eyes shining with a mixture of relief and joy. "It's over?" she asked, as the courtroom began to empty. "Yes," he replied, holding her small hands. "This part is over, but our story is just beginning." A year had passed since the final court decision. A year of transformations, learning, and healing. The glass mansion, once cold and impersonal, now pulsed with life. The walls, once bare, proudly displayed colorful drawings, recent photographs and the old ones, finally taken from the drawers where they had been hidden for so long. On a sunny spring Sunday, the property's garden was decorated for a special occasion. tables set up under white tents, fresh flowers in every corner, and a colorful banner that announced, "Happy 8th birthday." The girl, now officially with a name, a last name, and a history that no longer needed to be hidden, ran among the guests, her light blue dress fluttering in the wind. It was hard to associate that radiant child with the small, trembling, dirty figure found in the abandoned restroom. The millionaire watched the scene from the terrace, a glass of lemonade in his hand and an expression of serenity that few would have recognized on his face a year before. "She's blossoming," commented the housekeeper, approaching with a tray. "I've never seen such a complete transformation." The millionaire nodded, his eyes following his daughter as she chatted animatedly with other guests. Children from her new school, teachers, and some of the families rescued by the foundation he had created. "It's not just her who has transformed," he replied with a small smile. It was true. The man who once lived only to accumulate more wealth, who spent entire nights in the study and barely noticed the world around him, now balanced his business, responsibilities, and his role as a father with surprising skill. He left work promptly at 5, never missed a school performance or a medical appointment, and dedicated entire weekends to his daughter. Even more impressive was how his professional focus had changed. The Fresh Start Foundation, created in memory of his wife, had become his priority. The goal was clear: to identify and rescue children in situations of exploitation, to reunite families separated by trafficking or extreme circumstances, and to offer support so that they could rebuild their lives. In the center of the garden, a small ceremony was about to begin. The birthday girl climbed onto a small makeshift stage next to her father, both visibly moved. "I want to thank everyone for coming," began the millionaire, his voice warmer than any former employee would recognize. "We're celebrating not only my daughter's birthday, but also a year since our family was officially reunited." Murmurs of approval ran through the audience. "But today is also special for another reason," he continued. "Today, we officially inaugurate the first reception center of the Fresh Start Foundation." A small veil was removed, revealing a model of a modern and welcoming complex, designed to temporarily house rescued children and families undergoing reunification. "This center," explained the millionaire, "will be built exactly where that abandoned public restroom where I found my daughter used to be. We will transform a place of pain and fear into one of hope and new beginnings." Applause filled the air. The millionaire's daughter smiled, her eyes shining with pride. When her father handed her the microphone, she held it with the confidence of someone who already felt perfectly comfortable under watchful eyes. "I used to be afraid of everything," she said, her voice clear and firm despite her youth. "Afraid of not having food, afraid of not having a place to sleep, afraid of bad people." The audience listened in respectful silence. "Now I know that there are good people in the world, people who help, and I want to be one of those people when I grow up." Some guests discreetly wiped away tears. The millionaire watched his daughter with unrestrained admiration. Her courage, her ability to transform her own pain into something positive. "The center will help many children like me, and my dad said I can visit whenever I want to tell my story and show that no matter how bad it seems, things can get better." When she finished, the applause was thunderous. The millionaire hugged her, lifting her into his arms as he had done that first day when he carried her out of the abandoned restroom. Among the guests was the lawyer, who now served as the foundation's legal director. Beside him, the detective who had helped unravel the mystery of the girl's disappearance, now the investigations coordinator. "You've created something truly meaningful here," commented the lawyer, approaching the millionaire. After the ceremony, "We've created," corrected the millionaire, "and we're just getting started." As the afternoon progressed, the celebration continued. The birthday girl opened presents, blew out candles, played with her new friends. A casual observer would never guess the tortuous path that had brought her there. During a quiet moment, while most of the guests were serving themselves cake and refreshments, the girl approached her father, who was contemplating the sunset from the other side of the garden. "I'm thinking about Mom," she said suddenly. The millionaire looked at his daughter, surprised. Although they often talked about the mother she had never known, it was usually he who initiated those conversations. "What are you thinking about?" "Her?" he asked gently. "That she would be happy to see us together and proud of the center we're building." The millionaire felt a lump in his throat. "Yes," he agreed, his voice choked with emotion. "She would be very proud, especially of you." The girl smiled, intertwining her small hand with his. "Sometimes," she continued, "when I'm almost asleep, I think I can feel her hugging me. It's silly, right?" "No," replied the millionaire, gently squeezing his daughter's hand. "It's not silly. I also feel like she's with us somehow." They remained like that for a few minutes, side by side, watching the sky change colors as the sun set. It was a moment of perfect peace, of connection that transcended time and understanding itself. The next day, construction would begin on the reception center. The following week, the girl would have her first swim meet at school. The following month, they would take the international trip she had chosen, exploring the first of many places she wished to see. Life would follow its course, not perfect certainly, but full of purpose and possibilities. That night, after the party, when all the guests had left and the house had finally quieted down, the millionaire went to his daughter's room for the nightly reading ritual. He found her already asleep, exhausted after the day of celebrations. Gently, he adjusted the blanket around her, watching her serene face. How was it possible to love someone so much? How was it possible that, after so much suffering, life could offer such a precious gift? On the wall beside the bed, in the small gallery that the girl had created, was a special photo. The only photo that the millionaire had saved from the hospital on the fateful night of the accident. In it, his wife, with the most radiant smile she had ever worn, caressed her 6-month pregnant belly where their daughter was growing. Next to that photo, in a simple frame, was a drawing made by the girl. 3 stick figures, a man, a woman, and a small child between them, all holding hands. "Family," she had written above, with colorful and uneven letters. The millionaire touched the drawing softly, then leaned over to kiss his daughter's forehead. "Good night, my love," he whispered. "Tomorrow will be another wonderful day." As he carefully closed the door, he felt a deep and unshakable certainty. Despite all the losses, despite all the pain, life continued to offer chances for a new beginning. And he had received the most precious one of all. In the hallway, the millionaire stopped before the window that overlooked the garden, now silent after the party. The moon bathed the landscape with its silvery light, creating soft shadows on the flower beds that his daughter had planted with such care. "Thank you," he whispered to the starry sky, to his wife who could no longer see, to the universe that, in some incomprehensible way, had brought his daughter back to him. He didn't know what the future held, but he was sure that they would face it together, he and his daughter, whatever challenges arose. The pain would never disappear completely. The absence of his wife would always be a silent presence in their lives. But now, there was also joy, purpose, and the purest form of love. The millionaire walked slowly to his room, no longer haunted by the ghosts of the past, but accompanied by the promises of the future. A future built not on the material wealth he had accumulated, but on the infinitely more valuable treasure he had found in an abandoned restroom when fate had taken him, exactly where his daughter needed him to be. Tomorrow would be another day for a fresh start, and he was ready to live it to the fullest. If this story touched you, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications to receive new stories every day. What would you do in The Millionaire's place? Comment below and share this story with someone special.